Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again. Tirelessly scanning the street looking for the postman will bring me my copy of Moonglow by Michael Chabon. In the meanwhile, I'm reviewing the last book by another dope writer, Colson Whitehead, The Underground Railroad. Mr. Whitehead should learn how to button up his shirts properly, but on the frontal writing, he doesn't need any suggestion at all. He is actually quite dope. He actually wrote a very interesting article with tips on how to write better. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I'll put a link in the description box. It's hilarious and very useful. And sadly, the only other book of his I have ever read before is Zone 1, his zombie apocalyptic novel, which I completely loved. And it's clear to me now that I've finished The Underground Railroad that Whitehead has a certain good hand at writing horror, because there's lots of it too in this last novel of his. Horror and violence in The Underground Railroad are not a constant presence in the sense that somebody dies on every freaking page, but they are always there in the margin, always present in the background, and at any moment anything might happen in this narrative. And when I say anything might happen, I mean mostly horrible shit. And when I say at any moment, I mean that in several moments throughout the book, in several occasions, horrible shit does happen. And at times this book almost turned into a Cormac McCarthy novel, and it reminded me of some of the most gruesome scenes from Blood Meridian. I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying it to underline the strength and the punch of The Underground Railroad, which is a very weird kind of book, because on the one hand it's not extremely long, it flows wonderfully fast, and it's one of those books in which you get very and deeply involved in the life of the characters. No matter what kind of reader you are, you care for these people and you want these people to find a little bit of decency, if not happiness, in their lives. And on the other end, it is so violent at times, and it keeps killing your and the characters' hopes time and again, which makes it, as I said, a weird experience, because it's a fucking page turner on the one end, but it's also a punch in the balls on the other. A book like this is a very difficult trick to pull, and Whitehead did it by being a dope writer mainly, by alternating very bleak and depressing passages with wonderful instances of dark, terribly dark humor, by using his violence sparingly but very effectively. Like, there were moments when I was reading this book in which I literally stopped and stared at the same paragraph 3 times over in a state of shock, by alternating like hope and despair with the precision of a fucking surgeon. There's also lots to say about the characterization of people in this book, but all I can think of saying at the moment is that it is quite perfect. And I mean it, like, you get slave catchers in this book, like people who actually kill and murder honest and good people, and you end up sympathizing with them up to a certain extent, or at least understanding their psyche. You get like good, honest people helping like the needy and the oppressed, and you end up despising them at certain points in the book and like staring at their most terrible flaws. It's such an honest book in its depictions of people, and it's like it gives you this wonderful sense of empathy for all of its characters, that at the end of the day doesn't mean that you don't wish some of them would die already and some of them would find a little bit of happiness. It's perfectly orchestrated. At the end of the day, it made me think a lot about another book from this year I read and hugely enjoyed, which is Lovecraft Country by Ruff, because both of these books talk about the condition of African Americans. The Underground Railroad, if you needed me to tell you, is about slavery. The condition of African Americans in America in different moments in history. Underground Railroad, of course, is set in the 19th century. Lovecraft Country is set in the 1950s, but it's not like people in this book have a much happier life. And the great question at the heart of both of these books, Underground Railroad features some amazingly dark reflections on what America is. The core of these reflections, of this, the moral of these stories, we might say, is asking ourselves whether life is actually different nowadays. Whether, of course, on the outside life is very different, but at the heart of things, is the condition of African Americans today so different from what it was when these books are set. And please notice that being both of these dope books, their reflection is not limited to their like specific concern. Nowadays, African Americans might live a perfectly integrated life, even though I understand it's not like America is such a post-racial society. But other minorities might face the same difficulties they have faced time and again throughout history and still face nowadays. Muslims, for instance, might today be regarded as this new marginalized minority. You don't have to live in America. If you live in Europe, like maybe we don't have lynch mobs in this day and age, not many at least, but discussions such as the ones you find in the book, ideas that this kind of culture, this kind of race is less educated, that they are predisposed to crime, predisposed to rape, predisposed to murder. It's stuff you hear on the fucking television on a daily basis. And of course, books like this ask you and make you wonder and ask yourself, what am I in today's world? Am I some of the people who like will help the new Underground Railroad? Or am I like part of the problem? So I think you understand pretty clearly that the Underground Railroad is a fucking disturbing book, but it's also a wonderful narrative experience and it flows beautifully. And I would suggest it to anyone who is looking for an easy read, who is eventually going to kick them in the balls. All things considered, this is a flawless book, and it is proof of what I've always known, which is that the National Book Award, which the Underground Railroad recently won, has all the flaws and the quirks of any literary contest, but it is the one literary competition in my own experience which unfailingly goes to books that are actually good. That's my take. Let me know what you think about the Underground Railroad. Did you like it? Did you have any issue with any of its parts? What do you think about Whitehead's other books? What should I check out next of his production? Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.